that when you look at the records, that this political leader can accuse my government of mismanagement. I mean, there are a few facts that when you put on the table to compare his performance in office and mine, will tell you that if what I'm offering people is economic mismanagement, I wonder what words should we describe his stewardship of Ghana? And a mitigated disaster. I mean, that's how I would call it. There's some few facts. When we left office in 2016, the rate of growth of our national economy was 3.4%, the lowest in 24 years at the time, the lowest. The very next year, the economy rebounded to 7%. I think it was 8-point-something% the very first year. And from then until the COVID, we averaged 7% rate of GDP growth. If these statistics, which pointed to an economy that was working and was considered at the time, I think we were all here, as one of the fastest growing economies in the world, not just in Africa, but in the world, at an average 7% GDP growth rate, can be considered economic mismanagement, then the economic policies of the government that took us into the embrace of the IMF, and even after the embrace of the IMF, left our economy in the disarray that it did in 2016. And I have no doubt that that disarray contributed significantly to the decision of the Ghanaian people to
of former President Mahama, and that's my response to him. Okay, so let me allow the two of you. First, let me start with Dr. Monfant. What do you make of that response?
Okay, to battle that response immediately, I think when I was reading the previous history of the Ghanaian economy under NDC government, the economy was able to grow to 14%. That had never happened before. And then it subsequently followed by 8-point-something%. And then it moved away from there to 9.3% in 2012. So it means that in 2011, the economy grew to 14%, which we've not had any economy that had grew up to 14% since this government took over. And then 8.4%, he was referring to 7.7%. And the DC government was able to make it to 8.4% the subsequent year. And in 2012, they made it up to 9.3%. That is the highest GDP growth that had ever been seen. So where he is speaking from, I think there is something that is not actually adding up. But there is something to that you should be able to see, that the very time NDC was leaving power by then, I presume, and I know that there was the oil fields that they had was just 2 oil fields. NPP had a lot of oil fields within the set period. And the very time we grew the economy up to 1.9%, that was in 2020. The clear challenge that we had was the commodity prices, when the commodity prices went down. But they attributed it to COVID, which was not COVID. So when the commodity prices went down in the global market, then the oil prices went down. So it was like the kind of straw that they were holding has actually been uprooted. So they didn't have anything to hold. So they have to fall down completely. That was the reason why I give the historical antecedents. And I was actually trying to say that this economy has been managed by natural resources. So within your period or within the regime, if the natural resources prices happen to go up, suddenly your GDP would go up. It's automatic. And it doesn't mean that you've done anything to the economy. The simplest question you should ask this government would be that, what exactly have they done very differently to have been able to increase up the GDP rates to whatever they are talking about? What exactly have they been able to do? Is it an increase in export? And if it's an increase in export, can we identify which commodities that was increase in export to have brought in that returns? There was nothing of that nature that had been able to be done. Now, the second bit of it is that when the government says that they've been able to grow the economy, there is another thing that I want you to know, which the vice president always uses and accusing NDC for. It has got to do with inflation rate. And they're like, within the NDC period, we have a very high inflation rate. And the inflation rate is much more lower within the NPP regime. The challenge that you have to look at is critically this. Inflation is by the way we spend the money. And necessarily every economy know, or anybody who is a very good economist will tell you that to expand the economy when economy is actually not doing well. One of the other areas the government might use to do would be using an expansionary tactics. And expansionary tactics has got to do with moving into capital project and infrastructure. Capital project and infrastructure brings a lot of money into people's pocket, unless they move the model, which I will not go to qualify. Now, what it means is that once you decided to inject much more money into building up the Circle Interchange, building up the Legon Hospital, building up the Reach Hospital, building up the Bank of Ghana Hospital, building up so many infrastructure roads, that should tell you that this will alleviate the economy. It will bring a lot of money into the economy. Once it brings a lot of money into the economy, it has a little bit relationship, or it has some form of relationship with your inflation pressures. So there is a much possibility that inflation will start going up a little bit. Indeed, all of us would have been surprised, like I said, I would have been very much surprised if this government, upon the expenditure on consumption that goes through people's pocket, could have fueled inflation. I would have been shocked. The inflation could not move up because there is no infrastructure. Money doesn't go in because, let me tell you, economy is about the people. Once the people spend, economy grow. Once government spend, economy doesn't grow. That's the two different things people don't know. If a government would have to spend on themselves and spend on areas that does not necessarily trickle the money into people's pocket, you will not see inflation. That is one thing you should know. And that is economic mystery and myth and misinterpretation that they don't know. So therefore, if the money would have to go into, let's say, construction, you'll get the construction workers getting money. The laborers would get money. The masons will get money. Other people will get money. So you will realize that there would definitely be money into the economy. People's pocket would grow and it will get it work. So if this government is saying that the GDP growth within their regime had grown within 7% over and over again, and that had been better off than any other government, I will tell you that we may have to ask for the numbers. We need to know what is sparking the GDP rate to grow. Whether it is purely by a price increment, or let's say commodity price increments in the international market that has actually fueled the price growth, or it is based on the fact that the government has actually done something which is unique that we all don't know. So I don't buy that idea, and I don't stand by that idea. What I can tell you point blank is that this government has been poorly managing the economy. No successful policy that the government has even rolled out that I've ever seen, as far as this country is concerned. If you do remember very well, they introduced the digitization policy that every household will have to be digitized. And then they went ahead to come out with a Ghana Post. The Ghana Post would have to give you the location of your house and the number that is related to your house. What has happened to it? They rely absolutely on the GPS that we know, which was established by the United States in the skies, for we to be able to do a directional way to our houses. So which policy is this? Which way has that policy impacted on the growth of our GDP? Which of the policies? Can somebody tell me the policy condition and where one district, one factory has contributed to the GDP? Can somebody tell me where we have one village, one dam has grew the economy? And as we said now, we have a threat of food. And we are believing that maize is likely, the prices are likely to spike up because we don't have enough rain this time. So where is the dam that the government has built? Why are we not getting much more yield? Why are we not looking at our export level this time that we're going to export food? So what is the impact of one village, one dam? What is the impact of one district, one factory? How many commodities are we exporting this time? What is the tonnage? How much are we bringing in as a foreign currency? The country was recently bailed out on the issue of our foreign reserves, just because we don't have enough reserves in foreign currency. So because of that, the IMF would have to give us the the drawing rights system for Ghana to be able to convert its own into reserves and see whether that reserve would be able to use as a foreign currency to reduce our interest rate or interest on borrowings or loan repayment, which is imminent and which is due. Tell me, if you have a very educated mind within the system, and the government is telling you that we have done well, I think we need the numbers, we need the interpretations, we need the figures. We want to know where the growth is coming from. But from where I sit, I can tell you point blank that indeed none of their policy orientation has actually yielded any economic growth and have been impacted as a way of raising down the economy. What I know is that we have been playing around our commodities, and that is what is keeping the economy and nothing else. The government response to him is that they haven't done well and they haven't produced better. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Dr. Anokye.
Yes.
So your thoughts on what the president has said?
I think what the president did was speak English and then add statistics, choosing a convenient period. Because if you look at the 2010, like Dr. Manford said, the economy grew by 8%. With oil in 2011, 14.4% in 2011. Non-oil growth was 8.4%. Now, let's look at times you have to look at what resources you have and how you used it, because that brings you to efficiency of economic management. Look at the inflows for the MPP, as the former president said. 60% of oil revenue is accruing to them since the oil production. 60% has gone to them. Twice tax revenue available to them that the Mahama government did not have. They have twice the tax revenue. They have donor funds. IMF has given 11 billion Ghana cedis, World Bank 200 million USDs. The stabilization fund, they had 200 million USD. Bank of Ghana has given 10 billion. Now, the Mahama administration went on zero financing from Bank of Ghana in 2016. So what came in and how have you used it? Then you can compare like with like. If the government, if the central bank is giving you 10 billion, what can't you do with it? And the Mahama government had zero financing, but still the highest growth in terms of the period, non-oil example, was in 2011. So when you pick and choose periods, and you don't look at what you let go or don't talk about what you got to achieve that growth, then you are not comparing like to like. So and you know it's short. It was a short response because that is the only response that can be given.
There's a point where he mentions COVID, and I remember, and of course, when the former President Mahama was talking about, he talks about COVID becoming the whipping boy. The Vice President has also been talking on this matter. I'll come to him because he has become the digitizer. He essentially doesn't do a lot of talk on the economy anymore. It's all about digitization. So I'll ask a question about how that is. But let me read to you comments that he's made recently. He said, that was yesterday, throughout the world, price of goods have shot up. Shipping cost of container from China to Europe has increased from around $2,000 in August last year to $13,000 now per container, 650% increase. You also have major goods that have gone up as a result of COVID. And all of you in the construction industry know that the world prices for cement and for iron rods have really shot up. So when we see same things happening in Ghana, we know why it is happening. It is a global phenomenon as a result of the pandemic. We are trying to manage the impact in Ghana, and we are not doing too badly compared to many other countries, and we have to do even better. We have completed projects with most of your members, and we resolved to consolidate, but there's a point where he's talking about the competent management of the economy. Says, okay, I think I'm missing that point. But essentially, it all comes back to COVID. You heard the president say, we're doing so well until COVID came in. What do you make of that whole COVID excuse now being the main excuse of the government? Dr. Anokye first.
Yes, if you look at the historical perspective, His Excellency Mahama gave, at any point in our economy, there has been shocks, from bushfires, from in Rawlings' time, from global financial crisis in Kufuor's time. Rawlings found a solution. Kufuor took us to HIPIC to get some space in the fiscal phase. Mills, through to His Excellency John Mahama, also had an energy crisis. And even Ebola, he had Ebola. So it is what you do in terms of crisis that gives you, that you could then say that the economy is being managed. But if it is business as usual, and you can only do inflation and all business as usual issues, then you don't have the competence to manage the economy. COVID has come in, yes, but even in the normal health issues, like the former president, COVID will not kill if you don't have underlying ailments. The economy was already broke, and COVID obviously would have exacerbated it. But if you have the men and you can think without a box, then you have to solve it. Like you rightfully said, our vice president is now the digitization man, because he's running away from the economy. The textbook economics that he has learned, cannot solve this economy that we have, that you have to think without a box. You don't even have to think outside the box. So he's now moved into digitization, moving into a safe haven. He should come back to talk about the economics, and we'll have people like Dr. Mulford and others to talk to him about it. So basically, COVID has been over. It's like, I'm sure the present government just thank God the COVID came, because I don't know what explanation they would have given. COVID came with its own influence. So if you want to ring fence COVID, the influence that came in, you could have used that to ring fence COVID and deal with COVID issues without it impacting on the economy. Look at the monies we've had. Even internally, we donated funds towards COVID. We borrowed money towards COVID. So those monies were supposed to be the stopgap that would have resolved the normal day-to-day non-COVID environment. So if you have the money, why now talk about COVID again? It actually beats my mind. So using COVID, the former President Mahama did not say energy crisis and he just gave up. Kufuor did not say, the President Kufuor did not say global financial crisis and just gave up. The late Jerry Rawlings did not say the bushfires and all those things that came, so just gave up. Fix the economy. That is what I've got to say with this COVID situation, because this COVID, they are just using it, and everybody has COVID. If you go to Finland, Estonia, those countries, they all had COVID. And they were able to resolve it, and they resolved it because you see, they've used the internet digitization. So when you take the education, for example, within a week, Finland moved online, all their schools online. And then even now, some of the students believe that the online is even better for them than face-to-face. Those are some of the enduring things you put in place. President Mahama was putting in place infrastructure, fiber infrastructure for growth, for internet access and universal access. So that's why I keep on saying that I'm sure that is the bane of the NDC, trying to think long-term beyond 4 years. But you see, that is a social democratic party, and when you have those values, those ideals, it happens that it's easy to go to go beyond that. So COVID should never be an excuse for any government, because there was energy crisis, there was Ebola, and His Excellency Mahama solved it, and then left behind an economy that was ready for growth. And it's all gone down the drain.
Dr. Monfort, on the issue of COVID.
Yes, sir. On the issue of COVID, yes, great. Basically, during the COVID became advantageous for a lot of countries around the world, except Ghanaians that see COVID as a monster. And let me tell you the reason. COVID actually came in and there was a disruption in the world supply chain. So necessarily what it means is that a lot of import and export was stopped. Having to look at Ghana as an import-dependent country, it suddenly means that if there was COVID and there was no much import, suddenly that is to mean that we would have had stabilization in our currency. That is what it means. Now, during the COVID period, many countries in Europe and Southeast Asia had stabilized, and in some cases, their currencies grew more stronger, the local currencies grew stronger against the dollar during the COVID period. And the reason being that if you have about 80% or 100% or 70% of your produce being an imported ones, and there is a slowdown because majority of our import was coming from China, and the COVID started from China. So if China had slowed down in the supply chain, then there is a high possibility that the import that we might be importing from China would have gone down. And other countries had also gone down because we went through lockdown. But very strangely, during the COVID period, we had our foreign exchange moving up. Our currency was losing strength against the major currencies. And the reasons can best be interpreted that as at this very time, Ghanaians we were paying for a huge interest in the debt that we were owing to the foreign currency, other countries. And because of that, we still struggle to be able to mobilize dollar. So this is to tell us that, look, COVID hasn't done anything to the Ghanaian economy. We have other countries that COVID actually might have affected them. But Ghana could have been very exceptional, even if it is global. And I have a reason for saying this. For example, if you are an export-driven country, if most of your goods have to be exported and there is COVID, it means that it will stall your export. And it is your export that brings in the foreign currency. Once you have a foreign currency, it means that it's trading up your current account. And it suddenly gives you a very much more better position when it comes to your central bank reserves. Now, Ghana does not produce and send. The other funny thing you should look at is that when did COVID strike? The COVID strike on the 12th May 2020 in Ghana. That was the first time it was announced in Ghana. That was on the 12th May 2020. So now, as of this time, we have already exhausted our main cocoa season export, which is one of our heavily dependent commodity. During that time, gold prices were better. It was quite stable. But it was moving much more reasonable. The challenge that we had during that period, or before that period, has got to do with oil. That was the petroleum industry. And the reason was this. The reason was, I kept on reinforcing this position, that the reason was coming from the Russia and the Gulf, who actually are the major oil producers in the world. Because the cartel that was the Gulf state wanted to cut down production to be able to make sure that oil gained more prices upward. And the Russia was actually definitely not in support. So once Russia was not in support, the bottom line was that Saudi Arabia decided that they will be producing more than 12,000 or more than so many tons of oil into the world market. And that influenced the world market prices of oil to go down. And that was actually the reason why fuel prices went down considerably during the COVID. And it was not because of the COVID that oil prices went down. So therefore, if you're hiding behind COVID, that COVID was the reason why your economy is not working, I think you can tell that to people who are not deep thinkers. It will be an insult for for you to necessarily go back to the state and say that it is the COVID that has actually crippled your economy. Your economy was actually down. As at that time, you had already finished exporting your cocoa. And the cocoa prices was charged with the normal prices, as it were. And the price was okay for a cocoa pricing. And the gold price was quite reasonable as at that time. The oil prices were just affected by disagreement between the pricing and the model that had to be used by the Gulf state and the Russians. So under what basis would you blame it that the oil has actually, the COVID has actually been the effect of the economy? Even besides that one, let's put it aside. Now I'm going to go through the technicality with the response as to the way when it happens, it happens. In the world of economy, or in the world of monetary economy, this is the way it is. We have this we call it cyclical. Dr. Anokye was trying to explain that point further for you to understand that. Historically, they've talked about the kind of the challenges that we go, the ups and downs, that is the booms and busts. And the booms and busts has got to do with a situation we've been dealing for so many years. If it is coming from 1980s, and former president had made it known that from 1980s, there have been a cyclical challenges within our growth and our downturn. Then there is something critical we have to look at here. Usually what happens is that the monetary policy, which is responsible of trying to engineer much more funding and loosen up the economy and tighten up the economy, they hold the key. That is the way it is. It is only in Ghana, I am not seeing so. It is a central banking system or the monetary banking system that holds the key. They pull it down and make sure they loosen up the economy when they realize that we are in a cyclical challenges or critical crisis. And they tighten it up when they realize that there is a boom and you don't want to spark inflation. That is the work of the central banking system. Okay. So, under such circumstances, what we have to do as a policy response from the economic point of view would be that you respond to loosen up the economy. You don't tighten up the economy when things go bad. But a simple question that you have to look at is that usually I don't like calling people incompetent. Neither do I like calling people the words that they are not deserving. But at certain times, our way and attitude makes people feel like we don't know it. They makes us feel we don't know it. The reason is simple. At the particular point that COVID has actually ruined your country, the best way you have to do would be to loosen up the economy and not to tighten up the economy. It is at the same time that you are increasing taxes on petroleum, increasing taxes on the cost of products. As I'm speaking to you now, Senate is charging VAT on their properties. That is, if you rent, you'll be paying VAT. The government has planned to introduce taxations on rent, which is to take effect by next year, or probably closer by the end of this year and next year. And these measures are what we call a tightening of economic measures. That's what it means. This is the type of the time that you start pulling the economy back. Now, why would you like to tighten the economy when the economy needs a freeze or when the economy needs a lose up? You are tightening the economy right away. You are saying that the COVID has actually affected everything. And if the economy, if the COVID has affected everything, then the assumption is that the economy could be moving on a tightrope. And if it is moving on a tightrope, the monetary response will be that you have to loosen up the economy. But if at the same time, your policy response would be to introduce taxes, that would mean that you are using austerity measures at a point in time that you are supposed to use a leveraging policy to leverage the economy. Or at the point in time that you have to loosen up, you are using a tightening economic policy. So if you are using a tightening economic policy when you are supposed to be losing the economy, how do you want us to describe you? Competent, negligent, unaware, or a lack of detail into what goes on into the economy? So instead of we using what we call a counter-cyclical policy response, we are using a pro-cyclical response. And that is the worst economic policy you can ever implement if you are coming from a monetary point. Now, let me give you a second position. The government central bank comes up with a policy. And the policy was that because we are in a difficulty due to the COVID, we should reduce the policy rate from 16% to 14.5%. We went ahead to do that. And when we did that, what was the reason? The reason was that the government wanted to loosen up the economy by freeing up cash to people. Now, how do you free up cash to people? You want to rely on the banks that are using runnable deposit of people to loosen up the economy. Which kind of economic principle is this? Where did you learn this economy from? Let's take that one aside. Then the other bit of it is that the same government going through the same market to compete with the industries, to compete with the individuals, trying as much as possible, selling out your treasury bills and bonds into the local market to mop up excess cash when we don't even have cash in the market to even give out credit. So what happens is that you have a policy rate that has been reduced and you are in the market borrowing from the banks, and every bank with the risk margins getting to know that because we are in COVID, if this point in time, if you decided to give a loan to individuals, they wouldn't be able to pay because of the COVID pandemic and because of the dynamics within the economy, and also within the fact that you had closed up banks and you haven't released that cash to the banks for them to even pay up depositors, for them to have money to be able to spend. Because it is only when you spend that economy grow. When one's expenditure becomes one's income, that is the way economy grows, and that is the way standard of living is done. As far as that policy has not been done, you stifle the economy. That is one. After stifling the economy, you come back again into the economy and borrow money from the economy using your bonds and treasury. And then you go back again and say that I'm reducing policy rate to about 14% just to allow people to borrow. Where are they going to get the money to borrow to loosen up the economy? That's a confused policy rate. There is nobody who understands the economy would like to approach at the method that they are. But I strongly believe that at a much more fine time, they would need a proper response for them to know that when we talk about incompetences has not got to do with rhetoric. Incompetences has got to do with exhibition of your ability to turn around the economy using economic tools, which is quite acceptable, implementable, that have been effective in other countries, for we to be able to say that indeed, at this point in time, you're not incompetent. You've been able to turn the economy, and the growth will speak for itself. But as it is, and where we are with this kind of economic growth, and looking at the economic performances, it will be the worst economic policy and strategy implementation I would ever support. Thank you, Senna.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me bring it back, Dr. Anokye, on this issue, because a lot of people are asking, in this time, where is our vice president? One time economic messiah, a former deputy governor of the Bank of Ghana, the man who knows there's money at the Bank of Ghana that we're coming to use to develop this economy, all of a sudden is shifting to digitization. But there are those who say that is also not entirely disconnected from economic management, that somehow it is connected. Do you agree that a focus on digitization can be helpful to the economy? Doc?
Am I the one or am I the one?
Actually, Dr. Kofi Anokye.
Okay.
Of course, digitalization is key to the economy, because we have a digital economy. And if you look at the next generation, they are going to do a lot of things in the digital economy. But you see, you have to get same thing. You have to get the fundamentals right. You have to develop the infrastructure. Now, we seem to want to have instant results of what we're doing because of political expediency, and that is the problem with the present government. Because if you take in public sector and you are digitizing the operations of the public sector, it means that you're trying to take our traditional public sector into the digital economy in the form of e-government. If you do that, and at the same time, you are not taking a holistic approach to it, and you then want to tax the very medium that will take us online with respect to the data we use, the internet, and then the voice. So somebody else somewhere is taxing it, and you expect us to, and when it comes to technology, you have to find a way to diffuse the adopted technology you are taking. So it's adoption and diffusing of it. But in one side, we are just doing showmanship, we are digitizing, and then on the other side, you are imposing taxes because that environment has become more fluid. So you have to let it go. You have to let it diffuse to a point that nobody will want to do the traditional anymore and want to go online. And online is the way forward. So when you do that, and we know that we can't come back, then that is okay. But this is just trying to, and it's not being done holistically. Because if you have one ministry that you are digitizing, you are not digitizing the other ministry that is part of the value chain, then what are we doing? So that e-government, you see, I don't know why the present government likes moving away from things that have been started and built or not, because this is all part of the e-government. We are calling it digitization. Let it be the e-government project and let it grow with it. Because going forward, if you don't take care, the next generation cannot do anything on that. And if you want to go e-government and digitization, maybe ICT should be compulsory, maybe from class 1 upwards, because that is the tool they are going to use. So if you don't take a holistic approach, and you are taking approach as the former president would say, just a political gratification of short-term results, then this is what we're going to get. But digitalization is very important to the economy because we have what we call the digital economy, and that is the way forward. But now the issue is implementation. The issue is implementation. Lofty idea, and it's not something that was started by the vice president. E-government project has been there since ages. E-government project has been there since ages, and this is just part of it.
So
I would
please land for me.
Yes, I was going to say I wanted to. Once you're done, I wanted to, because the former president also spoke about financial irregularities, and it was an area I think I wanted to talk about. But let's finish with this.
Okay. Because I was going to ask you another question on the vice president. Whether there's also the feeling that perhaps we anointed him economic messiah too early. People perhaps had faith in him that they could not justify. Do you also? Are you one of those who agree with that suggestion?
Yes, I think, you see, he spoke a lot of, I always say, a lot of English and a lot of theory, and then gave us hope that he could resolve it. But he didn't place his economic theory on the ground as to how our economy is. To find a way and think, like I always say, think without a box, to match, adapt what he has learned, and then adapt it to suit our economy. So later, when he realized that he couldn't do that anymore, then he moved into digitization, a safe place. So obviously, I think he's been overrated, really, and I think now everybody knows that he's been overrated. Because all the indicators, all the over 101 questions or so he posed to our late Vice President, Mr. Atta, I don't know whether he'll be able to answer, because those questions are still relevant today. I don't know whether he'll be able to speak to those questions.
We should put these old questions back to him.
Yes, put his own questions back to him, and he should tell us that he has resolved those things during his time.
Dr. Mumford, on the issue of digitalization.
Yes. Very good. The global is going through digitization. For example, in the European Union and the European Commission, basically we were tasked to come up with a reporting standard on the blockchain and the cryptocurrency and the central banking digital currency. So we worked on it. We're even still waiting for the report to be approved. So basically, tokenism had been the order of the day. We trying to look at a way that we could digitize various currencies, and that one would be a free flow for everybody, for a way to actually see how fundings could be done. So digitization is very important, especially within the financial market and capital market as well. It is actually really linked up to the economy, but depending on whichever way your digitization is. I hope the digitization is not got to do with numbering houses, and also got to do with trying to have some other functionalities. But digitization is a great way to go. The Central Bank of Ghana have also heard that they are going to digitize their coin system, so which is also on the limelight. So I strongly believe that digitization has come to stay and is an order of the day. But the truth about the whole thing is that the issue that you came up with, and you asked a very good, reasonable questions with regards to whether the vice president is overhyped. I get myself confused over and over again, because I listen over and over again his speeches from the onset, but I'm beginning to believe that maybe he speaks it. He has never practiced it, and he has never touched on it. That could be one of the reasons why maybe he does so. Because I believe that there is a very sound functioning economic policies that, when implemented, can turn around this economy. This economy should not be a poor economy. We have got economies, we have got countries, we have got other things, which doesn't have even a quarter of what Ghanaians have. And they've been able to move from a third world country to a first world country. And I strongly believe that if we will not just throw our hands in the air and suddenly get back and think, I like Dr. Anokye's position that the guy had been theoretical. Very important. But we should not also be mistaken to become more political without being realistic as to how to turn the economy around. Or else, we would also find ourselves in the same box. We will be talkatives. We will not be implementers and will not be practitioners. So therefore, it is my strong conviction and suggestion that when one falls, sometimes we don't laugh. You take a lesson and crew out of it. And then you look at it that, how would you be able to do it better than the losing guy that has done? I can assure you that the economy has not been run well. People are feeling the heat. And I'm certain and sure with some degree that indeed MDC would come back to power in 2024. And just the very time, NDC would have to tell them the difference as to economic management. NDC has got a perfect record in changing economic narrative. But at this point in time, NDC will create the economy. We will not inherit it from them. Thank you.
I realize Dr. Anokye wanted to make a quick comment on that. That's the whole area altogether on financial misappropriation, financial irregularities. Actually, Doc, we have about some 2 minutes ago. Is it time enough for you to just make some quick comments? I think we should come back and discuss in detail. Yeah,
it's just a short comment. I'll just do it in a minute. If you look at the former president made mention of the Auditor's General Report and said in 2016, the financial irregularities were about 700 million. And in 2020, it moved to 12 billion. Now, my take is this. Public sector financing is different from private sector accounting and financing. Mm-hmm. So if we have a finance minister who is corporate finance and private sector oriented, in private sector, the end justifies the means. In public sector, the end is as good as the means. So if you are making profit, private sector, if you cut expenses and make profit, you are a guru. In public sector, if you cut expenses, it means the economy is not growing. You've not done any savings, and you've got situations where they keep on saying, and we done savings here, you done savings here. It means that you are not growing the economy. So obviously, if you are using that same mindset in private sector into public sector, you're going to have a lot of irregularities and procedural improprieties, and that is all I want to say on that.
Is that a suggestion that our finance minister is using a private sector approach?
The orientation, when you bring that orientation into this thing that the end justifies the means, I mean, just do it. It doesn't matter. Once you are making savings, when you do that, you're going to have a lot of financial impropriety. And that is what, because when you're private sector mindset, which is good at some time because you want to bring efficiency, you don't run public sector financing like that. You don't.
I'm hoping perhaps we can have another show where we put a lot of the initiatives that this government has put in place under scrutiny, because we haven't gone into detail with issues with regards to one district, one factory, one village. Some comments were made, but if it can be arranged so that we have a conversation into detail on some of these issues, I'll be very glad. But I want to thank you, Dr. Kofi Anokye and Dr. Jerry Combat Monfan, for joining me this evening. It was wonderful engaging you too.
Can I make?
Okay.
Sorry. Can I just make a point before?
No problem.
My quick point is that. Very good. My quick point is that he is not using the private sector experience into public sector experience. The bottom line is that he's not using economics, because economics. If you're using economics ideas to run the country, you will suddenly know what we call the private sector economy and public sector economy. So the bottom line is that maybe they are not competent when it comes to using the economic policies and strategies intended around the economy. Thank you.